Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
I think I'm getting into basketball.
What team?
Well, no, I'm not in that way. In the way that I've been on Instagram Reels a lot lately.
Okay.
And there's
this is the podcast
awesome...
now, by the way. Whatever
right,
I was gonna do as the cold open just got superseded by this because this is huge news. You're getting into the NBA through Instagram Reels?
Via Instagram Reels, yeah. Mostly it's a lot of lip reading videos when Draymond Green gets ejected or something like that. Or
so lip reading for me, but not for for all of your anti-John Boy stances on the podcast over the years.
Yes, exactly. I just want a more egalitarian lip reading universe. I don't need everything rolling up to John Boy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Do you think that that's maybe the rolling up to John Boy? New title just dropped. I was going to say, do you think that that's the first time that sentence has ever been spoken? I just need a more egalitarian lip reading universe.
Look, the best ideas are never popular at first, right?
That doesn't even relate to what I just asked you. I was trying to commend you on your beautiful grasp of the English language.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I appreciate
just Draymond, or are you getting into communist Wemby? Where's the vibe?
No, there's definitely some Wemby in there. I will say the other part of it is team account videos. You know, the thing where they're all rolling up on game day and the social media manager is is this photo a duck or a rabbit? And then they respond, and you're like, "Whoa, that's crazy."
Have you seen?
I thought he was going to say duck, but he said rabbit.
You watched the whole thing,
and I watched the whole thing. It's awesome.
Have you seen the Brooklyn Nets Letterboxd top 4 video?
I don't think I have.
You should go back in the archives and check the archives of the internet and check that one out.
Mm-hmm.
The Letterboxd account went to a Brooklyn Nets game and asked them as they were walking in for their 4 faves. Most of the Nets players didn't know what Letterboxd was and didn't know what they meant by 4 faves. So then they simplified the question. They were just name movies that you like. And everybody said Avengers Infinity War or Endgame. And then there were a few ball knowers in there, but there was a lot of couple super bads in there, movies that because all the NBA guys are 25, So movies that you and I might like, but even might be a little behind our generation, frankly.
Has
21 Jump Streets. They're throwing some 21 Jump Streets out there.
Has anyone checked back in on Colt Keith? What's he watching these days?
Is he on a major league roster?
It doesn't matter. His movie opinions, whether or not he's on a roster, it's gold is gold, baby.
I thought about Colt Keith the other day because
Do you think that's the first time that sentence has ever been spoken?
Interrupted myself because I was wait. I thought about him the other day because you know what I watched?
What?
Hell or High Water.
Oh, yes.
I don't even remember if that was on his list, but that feels like Colt Keith core.
It's Colt Keith core.
CKC. Hell or High Water, bro. That movie's aight.
Fine.
Everybody was like, this is life changing. We got a new guy on the scene, Taylor Sheridan. It's just aight.
Yeah. Everything he touches, I'm sort of all right.
Yeah, that's how you feel about Lioness?
I don't even know what that is.
You should get into that while I'm in Japan.
Okay.
You should get into a little Lioness action.
What else should I get into while you're in Japan? I'm going to have a few weeks to really get into some shit.
Exactly. Spoiler. Everything's going to be banked for the next couple weeks, so you can't be mad at us that we're not covering whatever. I had this whole thing prepared about how the Yankees reported $387 million in aggregate ticket and suite revenue in 2025 from the Sports Business Journal. your favorite publication, which you subscribe to for hundreds of dollars a year. But I don't even want to talk about that anymore. I want to talk about things that you should get into while I'm in Japan. The NBA, VORP.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to learn what VORP
Working
is.
on it. Yep.
Banjo.
Okay.
I want you to learn to play the banjo.
All right. That was going to be my question was, do you want me to learn the banjo or get into banjo music?
The mandolin.
This is just learning a bunch of instruments.
Well, you could learn the mandolin, the instrument, or the mandolin, the food prep.
You know, that's true. I have one. Actually.
Do you?
I do.
That's scary. I'm worried for you.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? That like slices things really thin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid of that. I
agree.
It's necessary for some cooking techniques.
You know what? I don't think it is.
Really?
Yeah.
You think your knife work is sharp enough, no pun intended, to do it without the mandolin?
Well, I think if it's not, get a better knife.
Okay. You can't cut something you can't cut a vegetable that thin. I don't believe you. Now that we're a video podcast, now that we've broken that seal, you should be doing a cooking show. I don't know. I guess.
All right.
What people don't know about Alex is that he's a little bit of a chef. A little bit of a chef.
Cook. Well, and I hate my biggest, I don't know if this is like a consumer rant, but I hate
hope not, because that's trademarked by Bauman.
I know. I hate a single use product. You know, it's like, oh, but here's a thing that slices something really thinly. I'm like, yeah, but what if I just sliced it slightly less thinly with the tool that I already have in my home? People are like, no, but trust me, this rice cooker cooks rice perfectly.
Yeah,
and I'm
so
like,
does the pot.
so do I.
Can I tell you something? That's how I felt about box cutters until I stabbed myself with scissors and had to go to the emergency room. Everyone's like, well, you don't own a box cutter? I'm like, well, for what? Cutting boxes? That's what I have scissors for.
Well, damn. Mogged by the box cutter community.
The mogged. I feel like I've been doing mogged on the pod for months before I was having this cultural moment. Because I think I saw like 2 people who are like 5 years younger than us say that in the Tipping Pitches Slack a couple times. And I was like, mogged is my new word. What else do you want to get
into? Where were
we? What else do you want to get into while I'm gone?
Maybe like penmanship.
You don't need practice. You have great penmanship.
I was just looking around my desk, seeing what things were on there, and if I wanted to get into any of them.
You know what you should get into? Renewing my license for me, because it's going to expire at the end of the month. That'd be great if you could get into that for me.
I can do it. That could be arranged.
Horse riding. I know that's a recent hobby of yours.
And to be clear, in this case, it's actually riding the horses, not just watching, like horse racing.
Oh, you could get into horse racing too. A little off-track betting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you even still do that anymore? Or do you have to go to fucking Kalshi for that?
Oh my God. We can't start on Kalshi this early. I refuse.
I like how we still don't know whether it's Kalshi or Kalshi.
Don't care.
Cold plunge.
RFK style or normal style?
Does he cold plunge? I've only ever seen him in the sauna with jeans on.
No, he did in the video with Kid Rock.
It's the same video. He cold plunges with the jeans on.
I think it was I couldn't tell the temperature of the water, I guess.
I think you should get into covering Kid Rock songs while I'm gone.
What if you came back and I was just unironically into Kid Rock?
Give me some.
I was like, no, I know that like everyone's heard the big songs, but trust me, there's some deep cuts.
Give me a little ba with the ba, dude. Come on, do it for the listeners.
I could not sing a single Kid Rock song. It sounds like you could.
I couldn't.
Wait,
doesn't he have the Sweet Home Alabama cover? Or like, it's not a cover, but it's like a derivative version of Sweet Home Alabama?
I don't know. It sounds like you know a lot about Kid Rock, though.
I've been in a car that has a radio in my life. So yes, I'm aware of some of what Kid Rock is up to. Sorry, I'm not antisocial walking around with my AirPods listening to my Apple Music like you all the time. I'll throw the radio. No, I'd never throw the radio on, actually. I never do that anymore.
No. We used to.
I actually really am looking forward to hearing what you get into while I'm in Japan. This is a nice way of this is a nice way of giving us an opportunity to do a little housekeeping here before we get to the rest of today's episode, which is fittingly a podcast about a little bit about the history of NPB and the current state of NPB with Jason Coskrey, who's a writer at the Japan Times. We talked to Jason about the financial structure of NPB and how it relates to the labor history of NPB. This really came because we were doing a Wikipedia pod over on the Patreon, and we came across the fact that NPB had a strike in 2004, but it really only lasted a day, and like we didn't know much about it. So we got curious, went down the rabbit hole, wanted to talk to Jason about that. Relevant because NPB is becoming more and more of part of the like average American baseball fan's life, with how many players have come over and made immediate impacts, Shohei Ohtani included. So this is a really fun episode for Jason to come on and for us to talk about that. But it's fitting because, yes, as we have mentioned multiple times now, I'm going to Japan. I will be going to a World Baseball Classic game, reporting from it. Not really. I'm just going to be hanging out. I'm really excited for it. So I wanted to use this as an opportunity to lay out the schedule for folks while I'm going to be gone. You're going to continue to get your Tipping Pitches podcast, that episode, the NPB episode with Jason today. Next week, we finally did it, Alex. We finally did it.
Long awaited.
The long awaited, years in the making renderings podcast we recorded with friend of the show, Dan Grothy, who is a real life architect. And because of that, was able to walk us through some of these things where we just had no way of getting to the bottom of this, and now we do. So that is going to be a very special podcast in which we talk through how the stadium renderings that we have gotten so much mileage out of making fun of come to be, why they look like that, who does them. Is there like one firm that's doing all of this? Do all the teams field pitches? Excited for that next week. And then in 2 weeks' time, we have a very special episode. I don't want to give it all away right now. I do want to say we have, for this special episode, which is already recorded, we did convene two of the most beloved guests in the history of the show, and put them in the same place. They had never met each other. Those two guests are named Michael Bauman and Matthew Robertson. Now, you might be saying, I know Michael Bauman from years and years and years of States of Labor in baseball. And I think I remember the name Matthew Robertson, but maybe your memory is a little fuzzy because, like us, you were drinking along during sipping pitches.
God, I hope not.
So we all came together to do just a frankly absurd. I'll tell you what, a frankly absurd draft. An absurd draft. That's all I'll say right now. Any other pieces of housekeeping that you want to let people know about before we get into our conversation with Jason?
I don't think so. If Bruce Myers steps down in the next week, we're going to really be in trouble. But otherwise, look, the baseball season's here. So what are we doing? We're talking different baseball leagues. We're talking architecture. And we're doing insane ideas with some of our friends. I don't know what you expected. This is what you signed up for.
Well, honestly, though, after I get back from Japan, we're going to have an absolutely locked and loaded couple weeks too. So strap in, because we're going to have the band topics. We're going to have the bingo card. We're going to have some big guests for those podcasts, which we'll talk about as they get closer. So we really have quite the pack next month and a half. Let's get into it. Before we do, I'm Bobby Wagner.
I'm Alex Paisley.
And you are listening to Tipping Pitches. Okay, we are now joined by Jason Coskrey, who is a longtime writer at the Japan Times. Jason, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Jason, we set out to make a podcast episode about NPB, about the Nippon Professional Baseball League. And so let me just fill you in on how we got to this point and why I was randomly LinkedIn DMing you Lord only knows what time it was for you, since we're on a 14-hour time difference. A few weeks back, Alex and I were doing a podcast episode, and we came across the NPB Wikipedia page, and we were talking about the 2004 strike and realized we just didn't really know that much about the history of NPB. I think a lot of American baseball fans know it in the context of maybe players who have been posted and come over here. more recently, I think a lot of people have filled themselves in on the history and career of Shohei Ohtani in particular. But there's this whole kind of really interesting backstory to the NPB and history and long, rich history to NPB that we wanted to chat through. So here we are. But before we do, can I just ask like the obvious question of how you ended up covering baseball in Tokyo? How you ended up writing for a Tokyo newspaper?
It's actually not really that crazy of a story. It was there was a job posting on a website. I think it was sportsjournalist.com. I think that forum is probably still around, but I saw that. I was 24, no real reason to stay in America. And I had an interest in Japan. I tried to become an assistant language teacher, and I didn't make it in the program. I was the first alternate, and that person came, so I didn't get to come. And so I applied for that. They got back to me. I kind of had an interview over the phone, and then they hired me. So I just kind of got on a plane.
As all great stories start out, I got on a plane.
The place I was working, they didn't actually believe me at first because I was working in Marietta, Georgia, the Marietta Daily Journal. And when I told them, and I had only been there for maybe a month or so when this happened, I told them I'm leaving to go to Japan. So I had to sit down with HR because they were convinced that my boss had done something. I'm like, no, I'm really going to Japan. Like, no one believed me at the beginning.
I imagine that's a bit of a certainly culture shock for you, especially from a sports perspective. I mean, I'm curious what your maybe experience was with baseball, covering baseball. I'm not sure if you were covering baseball in Marietta, but there's obviously a bit of a learning curve, and so I'm wondering what that transition was like to not only moving to a new country. I think this is what roughly 20 years ago now. That just said I'm sorry to phrase it like that.
Nah, it's weird every time I hear it, and I don't ever really think about it. It has been a long time though.
But I'm curious what that learning curve was like for you, and if I don't know if there was anything that surprised you when you sort of got over there and got your roots settled.
It was tough, not tough. It was an experience. I'd never covered Major League Baseball in America, so I didn't have that as a background. But I'd covered college baseball. I'd covered the SEC championships. I'd covered the NCAA tournament and things like that. So I had some baseline, but coming here was different. It was one thing, we don't get to go in the locker rooms, or in the clubhouses. So you've got to get your quotes. You've got to wait for people to get dressed and come out and, be in the mood to, I'm actually going to stop and talk, as opposed to I'm just going to keep walking. And once we get to the barrier where you can't come, that's it for you, which I think is the same in professional sports in America. Whereas, if a guy really, really wants to avoid the media, he just goes and hangs out in the training room where no one can come see him. It's just that in Japan, he's got to walk through the media because we're not allowed in the clubhouse. So that was different. It was different. A lot of times, because there's just so many different media outlets around, people will share quotes. Like, they'll go get quotes from people, and then they'll kind of get together and share them out. And that's something you don't really get in America. So at first that was a bit weird to me. It still happens sometimes. It doesn't seem to happen quite as much as it used to, but I have remembered games where everyone went out and then everyone kind of gathered together in a little room. Who did you talk to? Read that quote out for the room. Who did you talk to? Who did you talk to? That kind of thing. So that has happened to me before. And that may be kind of with certain teams. That could have just been those reporters with that particular team, because I'm not at every single game. But that also took some getting used to. Just little cultural things about Japan that are different than the US. The way you treat people, the way people approach people, and that sort of thing. And it just took getting used to being in that environment and adjusting to not knowing the language, not knowing what anybody was saying. And it's one thing to be in an environment where you don't really know the rules, but you can kind of figure it out. But it's another thing to be in an environment where you don't know the rules and you don't speak the language. And you might be the only person there who Japanese reporters, quite a few Japanese reporters can speak English, but you don't know that unless you're talking to them. And I can't speak, I couldn't speak Japanese, so I wasn't talking to them a lot. So, yeah, there was a lot of moments that took some getting used to.
So obviously there was a steep cultural learning curve. There was a steep language learning curve, of course, I'm sure for you. I wonder, like, what was your familiarity with the history of NPB when you went over to start covering? I know you weren't necessarily like doing beat reporting for, NPB teams at the time. Zero. Okay.
Zero.
So talk to me about like getting up to speed. Talk to me about what that was like truly just going to the source and steeping yourself in that.
So getting up to speed, my introduction to NPB was zero. Like I knew of Ichiro and I knew of Daisuke Matsuzaka, but for whatever reason, I'd never really been that curious as to where they came from. So I had no experience. So when I got hired, the editor, his name was Jack Gallagher. He told me to buy this book. You gotta have Wa by Robert Whiting, and he said read that. That'll give you a bit of a primer. So I went all around. I went back home and was with my mom in Detroit, and we were going around all the bookstores, and we could not find this book anywhere. And so I found another book by Robert Whiting, The Meaning of Ichiro, and I read that one, and that was kind of a little bit of a primer for me. To learn about Japanese baseball, kind of Japanese culture. When I arrived in Japan, there was a guy named Wayne Grazik who had been a columnist and writing about Japanese baseball for like 30, 40 years at the time. He kind of took me under his wing and kind of showed me the ropes. And, when I would go to Yomiuri Giants games, Wayne would read the lineups for me because I couldn't read the lineups. So,
right, because there's no even shared characters for you to sound it out. Yeah,
exactly. Everything was in kanji except for it'd be Japanese name Hollins for Damon Hollins. Right. Japanese name. So Wayne would read the names for me, and then there was Jim Allen, who I also met at a game, and other. He was covering baseball at the time. So I had a few people who kind of showed me the ropes, and then I actually met Bob Whiting, became friends with him. So he also was become a great resource for me. So it was just and my coworkers at the Japan Times, Hiroshi Kizawa and Kaz Nagatsuka. So it was basically just a lot of people helping me learn everything on the fly, because I got here and then 2 weeks later or so, I was getting lost trying to find where the Marines play and getting on the wrong train to go to the game.
I want to maybe zoom out a little bit or sort of go back to the beginning to talk about how the league was formed and maybe how that informs how it exists today, right? I believe in my sort of cursory research that it's basically a media mogul who puts together a team of Japanese all-stars to play a barnstorming team of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and the like. And sort of out of this is born this baseball league. I'm curious how that sort of that founding DNA, right? This media company that basically creates professional baseball as in part like a vehicle for content, for marketing, for that sort of thing, how that I guess has informed its history and maybe how you've seen it inform its present, especially as it's evolved as you've covered it.
Well, before I go back, I'll just jump forward and say it pretty much still does that. They are mostly still marketing vehicles in a way. It's not really about, say, the Los Angeles Dodgers, we want to win. So we're going to put all these resources into winning and making this a winning team. We're going to monetize all these different kind of things to put more money into our pockets. And again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think the Dodgers are bad for baseball, but that's a different conversation for a different podcast. But
well, it's a different conversation, but not necessarily for a different podcast. I feel like you can have that talking about that.
A different episode, I guess. A different episode. But yeah, I'm in a different episode. Sorry. But their goal is to win games. Win games, make money, and that's, in theory, is the goal of every major league team and every professional team. In Japan, it's more of, let's use this as just a marketing tool. And if the baseball team is running in the red, who cares? They're we're marketing it. This is more of, let's get the Yomiuri name out there. Let's get the Rakuten name out there, the Seibu name out there, that sort of thing. Again, on the ground level, the same as you say NBA teams and NFL teams that tank. That's a front office thing. The players, the coaches, they are all doing whatever they can to win games. So it's not that level, but in essence, the league is still sort of a marketing vehicle for, these media conglomerates. And that has kind of stayed the way. It's not basically, let's make a lot of money and pour that back into the team. It's more of this is how we market Yomiuri in a way. This is how we market, and this is how we look well. And so to go way back, of course, the baseball started in Japan. I think it was 1850 something, or Horace Wilson. That's the famous story where Horace Wilson taught it to his students at Ichiko, or not at Ichiko, but at wherever he was teaching in Tokyo. And of course, then historian Rob Fitz has found evidence that baseball goes back even farther than that. Japanese people were playing it with sailors. And then you have Koshien, which started in 1915, and high school baseball became popular. And there was the Ichiko teams who played against the Americans in Yokohama and beat them like 29-3 or something. I forget exact score, but they had 29. I forget what the American team had, but it was single digits. And so the American team asked for 29.
It doesn't really matter how much you score. I don't think he scored more than 29.
And so the American team asked for a rematch, and they got pretty much, the Japanese team put up 20-something again on them. And they asked for another rematch, and the Japanese team won that one. And then I think some sailors came in from somewhere. I'm murky on this, but I think they actually kind of ended up calling it some sailors from some ship, and they came in and finally won a game. And that kind of helped the popularity of the sport in a way. And then you have the Koshien, which started, and high school baseball became really big. And Koshien Stadium, where the Hanshin Tigers play now, was built for high school team, not for the Tigers. Tigers may not have even existed at the time, because Koshien was built in 1924. And even now, in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the season, Tigers have to go on the road. They kick them out because they have to play Koshien there. So
you're getting booted for some high school students. Sorry, I know this is your job, but
in the middle of a pennant race too. It's always in the summer. They used to call it the road trip of death, because wherever they were, they'd be wherever, and then you go on the road for 2-3 weeks and they come back out of the race. Now it's different now because there's stadiums closer. Like there's Kyocera Dome, which is in Osaka, so it's pretty close to Koshien. So it's not as arduous of a road trip as it was. They're not living out of suitcases, but they still have to move out every spring and every summer for the high school kids. But high school baseball was huge. And then you have that tour, the 34 tour, which was put together by Masataro Shoriki, of the Yomiuri Shimbun. And his name is actually still on the award that they give out. Ostensibly, it's for contributions to Japanese baseball and improving Japanese baseball, but in actuality, they just give it to whichever manager wins the Japan series.
Keep it simple.
Pretty much. A couple of years ago, they gave it to Masahiro Tanaka when he went 24-0. And I think Dennis Sarfate got it the year he won the MVP as the Hawks closer. He might be the only foreign player to ever win it. I'm not entirely sure about that. But anyway, Shoriki's name is still pretty prominent in Japanese baseball. But usually the Japanese all-star teams that would play, they also played Negro League teams too earlier than that. But those teams would disband. But Shoriki kept this 1934 team together afterwards, and they would become whatever the name of it was. I'm really sorry that I don't know it. I just forgot it. But and then they would become the Yomiuri Giants. NPB, they started off as a single league system, and then around, I believe, the first Japan series was in 1950. So it's probably about 1950 that they split off into 2 leagues, which is basically the structure you have now. To Central and Pacific League, which almost got derailed in 2004 when they almost went to a single league. And that got averted, and then we ended up where we are now, which is a long way of saying that nothing's really changed in the fact that Shoriki put this together as a way to market Japan market, Yomiuri, it was kind of a vehicle for that in many respects. And that's basically what baseball is now. It's just at its zenith, not at its zenith, but at the top levels, it's kind of just writing off whatever losses the baseball team incurs because it's in essence an advertising vehicle. Again, that's at the top levels. The players, coaches, they're all, they're in it to win it. What they're trying to do is win games and win ball games, and they work with what they got.
I'm so curious to hear about how, because I think in many ways you can look at MLB and you can say, okay, the goal is to win games. If you win games, you'll make money, right? I think that becomes less and less true the longer we go, like the further we get into this version of a baseball team as a financial vehicle, as a corporation, more or less. We have, just to use the Dodgers as an example, like they are owned by more or less an investment bank, right? Like they have a guy who's on the name as the control person, but really they are backed by one of the largest companies in the world. I think it's more or less semantics between how that operates in Japan versus how that operates here for some of the teams in MLB. Obviously, there's still variety at the ownership level and the structure and how some families own a team versus some are more of a corporate backing. But I'm so curious, and I think our listeners are incredibly curious based on the stuff that we kind of talk about in the macroeconomics of baseball, how the corporate ownership lends itself to something like, let's just say like payroll or like free agency. Is there this same sort of big market versus small market dynamic, or are the teams much more operating on, I guess, quote unquote, level playing fields? Or every 5 years or so, does SoftBank just say, all right, we balanced our budget this year, we want to put tens of millions of dollars or, the equivalent towards our baseball team because we have it in the coffers?
No, I think it's more of the former. It's there's a big market, small market aspect in Japanese baseball. SoftBank, which is funny that you bring them up because they spend the most money. And not just on players. I mean, they spend a lot of money on their infrastructure, their farm leagues, their R&D teams, and all that stuff. They spend money, but they also shell out the most money for the players. They are, I guess, as close to the Dodgers in Japan, if you want to get to a team, as anyone is. And a generation ago, that was the Yankees in America, and that was the Yomiuri Giants in Japan. And they had all the money, and they could sign the big free agents. And the free agency in Japan is a lot different than in the U.S. There's not that many free agents usually per year. There might not have even been 10 official free agents this year. I mean, they were the guys who just kind of got maybe released and they could sign with a different team for no compensation or anything. But most for us, like, there's a free agent list that comes out. Like, this guy reached his free agency rights and he's going to exercise them. And he's like an A-ranked player. So there's this compensation. He's a B-ranked player. There's this compensation for him. There's not really a lot of that because you don't have a lot of guys hit the market. But there was a time where a big player would hit the market and the Giants would throw a bunch of money at him. Or now it's kind of SoftBank can do that. Or you'd have a foreign player who they're governed by somewhat different rules. A foreign player's contract's up. He's going to go play for the Giants now because the Giants gave him a bunch of money. I mean, Raidel Martinez from the Chinichi Dragons was the best closer in Japan one of the best closers in Japan for about 2 or 3 years. His contract comes up with Chinichi. They don't have the resources Yomiuri has. Yomiuri says, we want you because we need a closer. We already have one of the best closers in Japan, a guy who was on the WBC team, but now we want you too. And so they get Martinez because that's what the Giants do. That's what the Giants have done historically. When there's a big player, they go after him because they have the money. Whereas you say a team like the Hiroshima Carp, they are not doing that. They get free agents, but they don't get free agents like Yomiuri does. They had a 3-time MVP, Yoshihiro Maru, 2-time MVP, Yoshihiro Maru. He came up and he ended up going to Yomiuri because Yomiuri paid him probably more than the Carp were going to. So there's definitely a dynamic of these teams have the resources. These teams don't really have the resources. It might not be as extreme as in MLB, whereas you compare, say, Dodgers, Pirates, but there is a definite gap, and you can see where teams are more willing to spend money. SoftBank has 3 farm teams. Most teams have 2, but they have the resources because there's in the NPB, there's the draft. In the draft, after the draft, then they go into the developmental draft. Developmental draft is basically you're drafting guys that you're going to have on your team, but they're not part of the main roster. So you're paying them, but they can't play in top team games or practice with the top team. It's essentially, it's like a red shirt in college almost. They're on the team, but they're not really on the team. And so SoftBank had, and actually that's where Kodai Senga started off. They drafted him as a developmental player, and he just rose up through the ranks. SoftBank has, they get a lot of developmental guys, and they have a third minor league team. Most teams have 2 minor league clubs, but they have the resources and the capital and the will to do that. And Yomiuri also now has another. Yomiuri actually, I think they probably did it first, but they have 3 minor league teams too. And so that's just pretty much how it is. SoftBank has the money; they spend the money. Often they spend it in a smart way. Yomiuri has the money; they often spend it in just what's the shiniest object? Let's go get that. And the other teams don't have as much money, and so they're a little bit tighter with the purse strings when it comes to free agency. And sometimes you may get a guy who, I'm from this town, I want to go back here, and he may go there. But there is a definite small market, large market kind of dichotomy going on, just maybe not as the same way, apples to apples, as in the US.
Is there so obviously there are differences in markets, different in team competitiveness levels. Is there a salary cap? Is that not even something that comes into play because these teams don't have the incentive to just spend more and more and more? Generally speaking, is it a sense of SoftBank, yes, can spend a little bit more than some of these other teams, but it's really not in their interest to scoop up every free agent, because at the end of the day, this is just a kind of another marketing tool. I mean, how does that, I guess, economic system work when teams are putting together their teams of players and looking at salaries and rosters, that sort of thing?
SoftBank's a bit of a different case because they don't really seem to care how much they're going to spend or have to spend. They'll just, at least in recent years when they've been under the umbrella of Masayoshi Son, who is
they dropped $4 billion on WeWork. They can afford to to pay a couple free agents.
Yeah. So the Hawks, they'll pretty much just pay whatever they want. I think you're looking more at say a team like even Hanshin has money, but maybe Hanshin or maybe Yomiuri. Those teams who have the resources, but they may say we've got enough. But again, Giants often will just go after the shiniest thing on the market. Even whether they get the guy or not, they'll go after him. So I think there is some of that from some of the other teams where we don't want to spend this much money on something, and so we'll just let that go. We don't want to put this much money into our players. We don't want to make our payroll go this high because we've got the company has other interests and the company has other things going on. So this is the money we're going to allocate, and we're not going to try to go out and sign Yuki Yanagita. We're not going to try to pry him away from SoftBank. We're not going to go after Tuffy Rhodes back when the Giants signed him, or even a Hiroki Kokubo when the Giants signed him from Dai or SoftBank at the time. So there is a little bit of that, I do think. I mean, without being privy to their books and to the why they make certain decisions, there are teams who are more willing to open their pocketbooks more than others.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the salaries of the players themselves are structured much differently than in MLB. It's not quite as much of a free market. It's more directly tied to your performance, right? So in some ways, does that prevent a team from going so far and above what another team might go to get a player in some cases?
I don't think it prevents a team from going so far and above. It's mostly, a lot of it is performance based, but at the same time, if you draft, you sign a guy, depending on what terms you signed him to, what guaranteed money you signed him to, because a lot of the contracts are essentially just sort of 1-year deals. Even if you sign a guy for all right, we've got this guy for 5 years. Sometimes it's this salary goes up or down. A lot of times, you'll see if you pay attention to Japanese baseball around after the end of the season or between November, December, you'll see all these players having press conferences and talking about their contract renewals. And that's where you see my salary stays the same, or my salary goes up, or my salary goes down. And because you had a bad season or you were injured, you didn't play, you negotiate with the team for this upcoming season, your salary goes up, your salary goes down. Usually, pretty much all the time, that stuff's kept secret, but it leaks out. The numbers that leak out seem to be fairly accurate. They never really get disputed that often. And there is a rule: if players are making a certain amount of money, and this is usually the star players who are making a certain amount, there's only a certain percentage that their salaries can drop. And if if they get offered a salary below that percentage, then they can become a free agent. That's what happened with Masahiro Tanaka. Rakuten offered him a cut of way beyond the limit, and so he was able to, instead of take that contract, elect for free agency, and then he ended up signing with the Giants because he had been coming off he had been hurt, so he hadn't pitched a whole lot that year, a couple of years ago, and so his salary dropped for his renewal, and I think that also may have happened with one of the SoftBank pitchers too. It might have happened with Toshio Sugiyuchi, who also ended up with the Giants. But
I'm sensing a trend here.
They dropped I believe his salary, he was offered a below salary too. I'm not entirely sure if that was him or not. But so I don't think it really hinders whether or not a team is going to pay way more beyond another team. I think that may just kind of naturally come out where maybe they know a little bit about this team might offer this, and we're just going to offer you a little bit more. Or you may have a player who just wants to go somewhere and that his heart's dead set on playing for this team. And so, other teams may not even try to pick him up. That happens in the draft sometimes. The player says, I only want to go here. So other teams will avoid him because there's no point. Well, especially because you don't get any compensation for not signing the player. So that scares teams off. And that's happened again with Yomi Yuri.
The posting system. We have to talk about the posting system because it is probably the element of NPB that American baseball fans are most familiar with, but is also,
except for me, who's way more interested in the fact that they don't have revenue sharing, but that's a whole different can of
right?
worms.
Yeah, exactly. But for the NPB, for the teams, for the players, is like a kind of foundational part of the league, and maybe not foundational going back to the start of the league itself. It from my eyes is a relatively recent invention, so to speak. I mean, the posting system feels like one of those things where everyone involved maybe feels like they are getting a little bit exploited, but no one can actually agree on who's getting the most. Like the players think they are getting screwed out of career money. The players think, or the teams think, that Major League Baseball is screwing them out of players. So can you sort of break down like how that system actually works and maybe who benefits from it?
Well, who benefits from it in its current iteration is probably MLB and MLB 1, the players themselves 2, and NPB last. And that used to be probably NPB 1, the players 2, MLB last, and MLB kind of fixed that because before there was a basic before there was the lottery system, and this came about, I believe. You have players who wanted to go to the States, and NPB tried to stop them, and of course there was Hideo Nomo who did what he did and made it over through the loophole, and they closed that. And then there was a case with Alfonso Soriano came up with the Carp trying to go to America, and so they had to come up with some kind of agreement. And actually, the first posted player was a foreign player, a foreign pitcher for the Carp. I don't think he ever even made it to MLB. But it used to be where basically a player would get posted, and MLB teams had to basically submit bids, like a blind lottery for him, so to get his negotiating rights. And that system worked well for NPB because, say, a guy like Daisuke Matsuzaka, that price is just going to skyrocket. Or for you, Darvish, those bids are going to just skyrocket. And you have teams bidding against each other, not knowing what other teams are bidding. So you're going to bid. They're probably maybe going a little bit higher depending on how much they want the player. So that benefited NPB teams a lot because you get this windfall of cash while you're losing this cornerstone piece of your team. For the players, they get paid, obviously, but their salary might have probably got dinged a little bit by the team having to pay the posting fee and the fact that they didn't get to choose where they could go. Boston paid the posting fee Boston had the best bid for Matsuzaka, so that's where he was going. He didn't have a choice in the matter. They tweaked the system a little bit to give the players a little bit more freedom. I think they could choose between some bids. And where it is now is probably the most beneficial for MLB because they basically got the posting fees to be a percentage of a contract. I think before they had made it where it was 20 million. So that could be like the higher posting fee. So that was good for MLB because you're not paying $60 million posting fees anymore. You know what it is. It's 20 million. The player chooses where he wants to go. I think that probably happened in 2013 because Masahiro Tanaka's posting almost got held up. And the last person to go through that system, they grandfathered Shohei Ohtani in through that one. And even he didn't get much money because he was considered as an amateur player because of his age. But that was one MLB rule. NPB didn't have anything to do with that. And he knew that going in. He just decided he didn't care about the salary.
I think it worked out for him. If I could just opine for a second there. It worked out okay.
Worked out great for him. And so, now the posting fee is a percentage of the player's salary or the contract that he signs. And so you say Yoshinobu Yamamoto got a big contract from the Dodgers. The Oryx Buffaloes got a big posting fee for him. Roki Sasaki, like Ohtani, had his wages tied to his age. So the Marines didn't get nearly as much of a posting fee for him. So it's a lot more volatile now for the NPB teams because you gave up a Roki Sasaki, you basically get pennies on the dollar for him. You get almost nothing for him, basically, comparatively to what you would have gotten if he had been posted in the era of Yu Darvish and Daisuke Matsuzaka. So the NPB teams really lose out on this deal, especially if you have a guy who's like a generational talent who has the leverage to say, post me when I want to be posted, whether I'm 25 or not. You're going to just lose a ton of money. Whereas for the players, they get to pick where they go. Now, there's no, this team paid the most, you have to go there. Now you have a choice. You can go around and talk to all these teams, find out which team is the best fit, which team, I guess, has more, if you're younger enough, which team has the most international pool money, or which team's going to pay you the most, or which team has the best facilities, best place you want to live. So for them, it's great. For MLB, it's good because the posting fee is a lot less than it used to be. Well, it can be a lot less than it used to be, depending on the player. Yoshinobu Yamamoto notwithstanding in that because he got a huge deal. But so it's good for them, and it's good for the players, and it's not good for MPB. So
you used a word that Alex and I love here on the podcast. That word is leverage.
Okay.
I'm fascinated by the leverage question for someone like Roki Sasaki or other young stars who are coming over while they're still amateurs, and so then their wages are kind of artificially suppressed by MLB's Byzantine rules. I wonder why Oryx says yes to that. Is it just to do right by the player? Is it because if they don't say yes, he'll go to a different NPB team who will say yes, and then they'll get nothing for him? Who is exerting that leverage on Roki Sasaki's Japanese NPB team for them to say yes to get pennies on the dollar for him to go pitch for the Dodgers, the richest sports franchise in the world, maybe?
Well, it'd pretty much just be him and whoever his people are, because even if Roki Sasaki, if the Marines had said no, we're not going to post you, then he would not have signed. And if he would not have signed, then he would have to sit out of baseball for a year. And then he'd go into the draft again, or maybe he'd go to MLB if he could. I'm not sure what his thinking was. But because as I said before, there's no compensation for draft picks in the NPB draft. So Tomoyuki Sugano is a good example of that. The Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters drafted Tomoyuki Sugano. He said he was only going to play for Yomiuri. At the time, his uncle was managing the team. And so all the other teams stayed away from him because he said, I'm only signing with the Giants. Well, he got drafted by the Fighters, and he said, I'm not going to sign. And he didn't sign. So he sat out for the entire year. And he couldn't play in the States, couldn't play in Japan. He was just here. Shohei Ohtani.
It's honestly kind of badass that Nippon Ham drafted him anyway. I can sort of respect that, honestly.
And Shohei Ohtani said, I'm going to MLB. No one draft me. And the Fighters drafted him. And I believe this was the next year as well. Yeah, it was the next year because he and Sugano were in the same draft class. So it was literally the next season. They could have gone 2 years without having their first draft pick or anything for it. But of course, they got Ohtani to stay. But essentially, the leverage is, I'm just not going to play for you, and you're going to have wasted this draft pick, and that's really it. And so the Fighters banked on being able to convince Ohtani to stay and play. They couldn't convince Sugano. So with the Marines, I guess they had to make a decision. Is it better to have a couple of years of him and see what we can do, or is it better to not have him at all? And so I guess they did the math. They did the calculations on that, and they decided to draft him. And I don't know for sure that he had some kind of clause in his deal. I'm guessing that he did. I don't know if that's been reported or not, but he must have, because there's no way they would have just done it otherwise, because once he's on the team, he doesn't really have any more leverage other than, well, he can't retire because that got closed. He doesn't really have any leverage then. His leverage would have been before he signed. So they must have just done the math and said it's worth it to get him in here. Maybe we can convince him to stick around a little bit longer. And I suppose they weren't able to.
So it's obviously, especially as of late, a relatively fluid labor landscape with power shifting towards players, away from players, back towards players, towards MLB. I had read something not too long ago about how the Japanese baseball players union was bringing an antitrust lawsuit against the league itself over their reserve system. I think they were looking to help from the MLBPA to create a structure that more closely mimicked the free agency system that exists here in the US. I think they wanted name, image, and likeness control as well. All the very standard things and things that come up a lot on this podcast. I'm wondering sort of your insights into that fight and just kind of what the current, I guess, labor moment feels like in this sport. If we talk a lot about the players union and Major League Baseball as being this big, strong American union. And I wonder how that compares to a place like in the NPB where the incentive structures are a little bit different.
As far as the antitrust thing, I'm aware of that. I don't really know too much about that. So I that's not really something I can speak from a lot of real knowledge about. But as far as like the labor, the Japanese union does not really have a ton of power. It doesn't exert influence the way the MLB union does. But I also, to be fair, few sports unions do. But because even the 2004 strike was 2 days, and
Right.
when they had that strike, they still went to the stadiums and did things with the fans. But that was also a kind of a savvy move because it got the public perception on their side, and so it enabled them. But it was an absolute show of power though for them, and it was kind of rare to see. It's a little bit before I arrived in Japan, but it was a rare show of power. Whereas one of the teams was losing money, Kintetsu, and they were going to merge, and then there were rumors that 2 other teams were going to merge and they were going to make a 110 team league. So the players were against it. They were against the fact that it was like being done without their knowledge or input or without the knowledge of the fans. And so they were upset, and they said, hey, okay, put this on hold for a year. And apparently NPB said, no, we can't do that. We can't put this stuff on hold for a year. And so, yeah, they said we were going to strike, and they couldn't meet an agreement, and they struck, and they lost a lot. The league lost a lot of money. But of course, the end game was that instead of having 4 teams contracted into 2 or merged into 2 and have a 10-team league, you have the Rockton Eagles come in after the Kintetsu and Oryx merger. So you stick with the same 12 teams. So there's that many more. You still have those players, you still have those jobs, you still have that infrastructure. Although Kintetsu, the Kintetsu fans sort of got the short end of that stick because their team was pretty much mostly swallowed up by Oryx. There's not a lot of Kintetsu left in that. I mean, the colors are now all Oryx. They play where Oryx play. No, they don't play where Oryx play, but yeah, it's mostly just Oryx now. There's not really much Kintetsu left. But that was a rare show of power. And then after the earthquake in 2011, 2011, the Central League wanted to start playing games pretty early, and the Players Union stood up again to them. They were led at the time by Takahiro Arai, who I believe was playing for Hanshin at the time. But that was a bit of a show of power too, where they were like, look, we need to stop. We need to wait. We're going to do this at the right time, not while things are still in flux like this. It's too early to go back to playing games. And they're actually, that pushback worked that time as well. But those situations are pretty rare in Japan, where you can see that the union wields its power like that. I believe if they were to make a concerted effort to wield their power, maybe they have more power than they think they do. But for whatever reason, they don't always seem to do it. They did it once for the WBC. They threatened to not play. That might have been after the second or the third one. But it was floated out that unless they get more compensation, they weren't going to play the WBC, which obviously is a huge leverage play because Japan cares about the WBC like more than probably any other. Definitely more than the U.S. The Latin American countries seem to really care about it as well. But Japan, I mean, they're already playing exhibitions, and the team has been together since the 14th. And so
that's awesome.
There's they really care. So that's how, and especially in Japan, like the reputation matters, and how you look in public matters. And that was just going to be just such an embarrassing thing if Japan, of all countries, says we're not going to play. So the players had some power there, and they exerted it in that way. But overall, I think as far as labor goes, the Japanese union doesn't really wield as much power as, say, like the United Auto Workers Union in the US, or the MLBPA, or maybe even the NFLPA. So not saying that they couldn't, but they don't seem to really flex as much as those entities do. And it may be harder in the Japanese landscape. And that's probably something someone who is more in tune with Japanese labor laws can tell you than I am.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit versed in it, but not versed enough to be confidently speak with you about Japanese labor laws. But I'm sure there are also probably some differences in the labor laws that make it a little bit harder for the Japanese union to mimic exactly the U.S. union.
Well, I know we're sort of running out of time here, but I did want to ask one kind of quick follow up on that front, without hopefully without opening too big of a can of worms. But like, you say like they probably have more power than they choose to wield. I think that one tension that exists with the MLBPA and fans is that I think a lot of fans think that the players are quite privileged, that they get to play a kids game, that they should just take things, like accept the conditions that they have for the sake of being able to deliver baseball for fans, because families need it, because people like to come out to the ballpark. Obviously, baseball is such a huge, huge piece of Japanese culture. So I wonder if that same tension or a similar tension exists, wherein fans, because it is such an important part of sporting as a whole, it is far and away the biggest sport in Japan. Whereas, MLB, you could argue like, yeah, well, we don't give a shit as long as there's football on every Sunday. I wonder if there's they're in a little bit of a tighter spot to be able to wield some of that power, or how you view that dynamic.
Someone may disagree with me, but I think in a way the public perception in Japan is more with the players than it is in the US. You see it all the time. A guy asks for more salary in the US in the game, and the public all automatically you make enough money. Why do you need more money? Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, public perception goes with the owners for whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know why. Maybe it's just allegiance to team. It's kind of analogous. I know I was listening to another reporter, Dan Wetzel. He was talking about college football. He said the greatest thing that the leaders of college football the greatest trick they ever pulled was getting fans to care about revenue, and that sort of thing. Totally. And for whatever reason, people side with that. And it used to be in Japan where when Hideo Nomo was doing what he did, there was a lot of public sentiment against him from teams, from fans, and he went over and succeeded. And for whatever reason, maybe that helped start a shift where people didn't see it as going against the power structure or going against the established way quite the same way as they did before. Junichi Tozawa skipped NPB and went straight to MLB, and the teams were not happy about that. But there wasn't this upswell of the public saying, "What are you doing? Why are you turning your back on Japan? Why are you betraying Japan like this?" The way the kind of teams were, and they were probably afraid that he was going to start a lot of players skipping NPB. So it was probably them out of the defensive position. And they actually even tried to make a rule where you couldn't play an NPB if you came back on the Tozawa rule. But there wasn't like this big swell of public perception or public sentiment against him. And so even in 2004, although I wasn't here, but just from reading things about that the public was on the player's side largely. There was obviously people who weren't on their side and who probably thought you make this much money. But they were largely on the player's side. So I think in a weird way in Japan, for whatever reason, I think the people see the players, I think, not on their level, but maybe closer. Whereas the baseball players here a lot of times will take the Shinkansen between games or between places. So fans, can't get really, really close to them, but you're closer than them, you're going to get to your average major league team. Yeah. You're going to see them more. It's a little bit more of a slightly more intimate relationship. It's changing, and it's not, can't be buddy, but for whatever reason, I think maybe the fans feel a little bit closer to the players. And there's also not the same because there's not the same free agency as there is in the States. There may not be the same sense of these guys are just mercenaries going after the top dollar. Mm-hmm. There's more of a, you stayed here for this time. You stayed here long enough to earn your free agency rights. You should be able to do whatever you want to do. And the fans, a lot of them in large part, seem to be accepting of that. And so when I say I think the union has more power than it probably thinks it does, it's because I think that depending on what the issue was, what they were trying to get, I think that they could sway the public onto their side the way that they were able to in 2004, because I think the relationship is just a little bit more, I think maybe they feel closer to NPB players than fans in the US may feel towards MLB players. And they're also not making the stratospheric money that those players are making too. So, and then that's just my opinion. You could have like Jim Allen, who's an expert on NPB. He could tell you something completely different. So that's just my feeling, is that I think that depending on what the issue was, I think the players could sway public sentiment. And if they sway public sentiment to the point that it starts to make the owners or the conglomerates look bad, then they get at least met halfway.
I was going to say, if anything, the mercenaries in this situation are the corporations that are buying these teams. I mean, if there's anybody in this equation that is like in it for the money, it's the corporation that's literally using this as a marketing ploy because it's too expensive to buy ad space on Japanese TV or billboards or whatever. So, all right. Well, I know that we've taken plenty of your time, Jason. We're very appreciative. It's the morning for you there, whereas we're winding down for the evening. Where can people read some of your coverage of the NPB? What's the best way to find it?
The best way to find it is go to the Japan Times website. I'm there. You can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Jay Coskrey on both, and you can hear my ramblings there.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you to Jason. You can find his work over at the Japan Times. Links to his bio in the description. Don't forget, next week, Renderings Pod. 2 weeks from now, Deranged Draft with two of our favorite guests, Michael Bauman and Matthew Robertson. More on that to come later. We'll talk to you on this feed right here in 1 week's time. Bye.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping pitches.
Tipping pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!